Second hearing this morning, where we'll be discussing the Congressional Budget Office and its appropriations request. CBO has become so much a part of this institution that we may take it for granted. But we should remember what a key role CBO plays in helping Congress effectively exercise the power of the purse assigned to us by the Constitution. Before CBO was established in 1975, Congress largely depended on the executive branch for budget and economic analysis and estimates of the costs of proposed legislation. With CBO, Congress has its own independent source of cost estimates for legislation, assessments of the President's budget proposals, and projections of the future path of spending, revenues, and deficits. We need to protect and strengthen that capacity. The CBO budget requests $57.3 million, which is a $2.4 million or 4.3% increase above fiscal year 2020. Virtually all of that is for personnel costs. This funding would support existing staff and fully fund 7 new employees hired in fiscal year 2020, as well as the increased cost of federal benefits. Furthermore, it is my understanding that this request will also support Dr. Swagle's 3 initiatives, which are to improve its responsiveness. CBO plans to make greater use of expert consultants in high-priority research areas, such as health policy, set up an internal IT system to track and manage documents, which will help streamline some aspects of the process by which the agency provides information to Congress, and that $45,000 be appropriated as no-year funding, which would facilitate employees' attendance at important academic conferences that are held near the beginning of the fiscal year. This subcommittee has highlighted the need for responsiveness and transparent CBO, and I believe CBO shares that objective. For example, in recent years, CBO has been making more underlying data and details of its economic and budget projections publicly available. It has been publishing more information about its models and methods and more analysis of the accuracy of previous projections. These are all welcome developments, and I want to hear about CBO's future plans in this area. I should note that the appropriations committees are the source of some of CBO's heavy workload. We need CBO's help in making sure our bills add up to what they're supposed to, and we need CBO cost estimates at each stage of legislative action. The Appropriations Committee gets great support from the people at CBO who do appropriation scorekeeping, which sometimes includes late nights, weekends, and holidays, and, as you know, on short notice. The committee appreciates that, and I'm certain other committees similarly appreciate the people at CBO and the work that they do. Our witness today is Dr. Philip Swagel, who was appointed CBO Director on June 3rd, 2019. Previously, Dr. Swagel lived in Massachusetts, 5th Congressional District.
Glad we're highlighting the right things.
I'm going way back. I'm going to go way back.
Maybe not.
He was a professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy and a visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and the Milken Institute. He has also taught at Northwestern University, the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, and Georgetown University. His research has involved financial market reform, international trade policy, and China's role in the global economy. Before Dr. Swagel testifies, let me turn to our ranking member, Ms. Herrera-Butler, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to extend a warm welcome to the 10th Director of the Congressional Budget Office, Dr. Phil Swagel. Thank you for meeting with me in my office in December, and welcome to your first appropriations meeting. Not only does CBO produce hundreds of formal cost estimates, thousands of preliminary cost estimates, dozens of calls from frantic chiefs of staff in the dead of night, and dozens of analytic reports and papers, releases numerous economic projections, and is a constant source of advice relating to budget issues for us, for members and staff. The CBO also provides scorekeeping reports and estimates for individual appropriations acts at all stages of the legislative process. So CBO's fiscal year 2020 budget request is $57.3 million, which represents a 4.3% increase from last year's enacted level. In reviewing your budget justification, CBO continues to focus on responsiveness to Congress, increased transparency, and expanded analytical capacity. All 3 items I wholeheartedly support, and I look forward to hearing more about your plans. Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Great. Without objection, your written testimony will be made part of the record. With this in mind, please summarize your statement and highlight your efforts of the past year to the subcommittee. After your statement, we'll move to the question and answer period. You're on.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Ryan, Ranking Member Hero Butler, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the chance to present the CBO budget. And as you said, this is my first time doing this. So I just want to start by acknowledging the incredible team behind me. This is the CBO financial team, which is an amazing group of people. And it's the overall agency, it's just been a privilege to work with them and with the overall team. So as you said, we're asking for appropriations of $57.3 million for fiscal year 2021. It's an increase of $2.4 million, or 4.3% from the current fiscal year. And thank you to the Congress and the Appropriations Committee for your continued support. Now, most of our budget, as you said, Mr. Chairman, about 90% is for personnel costs. So the proposed budget that we have requested would allow us to implement the multi-year staffing plan that was the basis for our funding increases in 2019 and 2020. That the Congress increased the CBO budget the past 2 years to bolster our capacity to be more responsive, be more transparent. And we've been working to accomplish that, and we're going to finish the plan to increase our staff this year. And most of the requested $2.4 million increase would allow us to remain at the higher staffing level, right? So we'll have 2 years of increasing the staff, and then the request now is just to stay there. So it would cover the normal increases in personnel costs, as well as a full year's worth of salaries and benefits for the 7 new staff members we will hire this year in 2020. And so let me just briefly say how that funding would bolster our responsiveness and transparency. An important part of the staffing that we've been doing is to better coordinate and integrate the analysis across the parts of CBO. So to hire people who can work across different parts of CBO. And so, someone who can do healthcare can also work on energy policy or other things. And so we're organizing staff with broader shared portfolios that when there's particular congressional interest in one area, instead of we can move people around instead of having people stovepiped. And so dedicate more resources to regular reporting information requested by committees of jurisdiction, and dedicate more staff to create publications that explain CBO's work. And I can go into more. There's more in our, the full statement. And then, as you said, about $400,000 of the increase is for costs other than personnel, and that would fund the 3 initiatives that you mentioned. On the responsiveness, there's some high priority areas, healthcare in particular, moving forward, climate and energy policy as well. So we're going to focus our increased staff in those areas. The information technology system we hope to create over the next year, again, will just help streamline our ability to respond quickly to congressional requests. So let me just highlight some of what we do and what the budget request would support. So we expect to do about 750 cost estimates, mostly to the authorizing committees after bills are reported. We respond to, as you said, thousands of requests for technical assistance from committees and members. A lot of this is before legislation is introduced, and for some legislation, especially the bigger ones, we will go back and forth dozens or probably hundreds of times before legislation is introduced. We'll do about 130 scorekeeping reports and estimates for the appropriations process, including account level estimates for individual appropriations acts at all stages of the legislative process, and then the summary tables and the running totals on a year-to-date basis. And then we'll do about 70 analytic reports and papers. This will be about the economic outlook, the budget outlook, and the overall economy, and then the specific topics: healthcare, defense policy, Social Security. We have some work, like I said, on climate and energy policy that I expect over the next year. So, so that's what we're aiming at, to make sure that we support the Congress on the policies that the Congress is focused on, and make sure our work is high quality, but also transparent and responsive. So why don't I stop there, and thank you again for this opportunity to present our budget request, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. Start with the gentlelady from Massachusetts.
Thank you. I feel like I have an inside track today. Thank you, Director Swagel, for joining us. The CBO is such a critical piece of what we do here. I'm hoping you can sort of flesh out the picture for me. I know that CBO provided 711 formal cost estimates to Congress, which sounds staggering. But that's a 25% decrease, actually, in formal estimates. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Is that a lack of resources? Is it just the sheer volume of bills that we're filing? I'd like to sort of dig into that decrease a little more.
It's a mix. We get over 90% of our cost estimates before a bill goes to the floor of a chamber. So in some sense, we're on time in a sense for it's well over 90%. And we work hard not to be the kind of the bottleneck at any point in the legislative process. After this year, I think we'll be in a good position in terms of the responsiveness. The decrease reflects partly on the side of the Congress, that if there's fewer pieces of legislation coming out of one chamber, with the other chamber in particular, then it just means we have fewer cost estimates. And our work is disproportionately for the House, just because the House passes more legislation. And there's certain committees that pass a lot of legislation. So financial services is our top. So I'm not client, but the number one. And then there's others, a couple others. No, we don't. Yeah, and we're usually pretty good about being responsive. That being ready when they need us. We don't always. Once in a while we make them wait. But overall we're pretty good. So that's the reason for the dip, is in some sense we will estimate anything that comes to us, just a little bit less has been coming to us mainly from the Senate.
Yeah. One thing we've experienced, if there is a bill that we're trying to sort of get support for, but a lot of members have concerns about, well, what's it going to cost? But if it's not a priority item, and if it's not linked to a real committee, it can be very hard to get that formal cost. Have you ever considered a sort of cost light option, something more informal that could sort of give an indication with all the guardrails about this is not the same as your full analysis?
It's a challenge because to do the full, we need the legislative language.
Yeah.
And we provide technical assistance, so we will provide informal feedback, but it's a challenge for us to get all the way even to kind of a light estimate without the legislative language. And generally the staff working on an issue are basically dedicated to the chairs and the 4 chairs and ranking members on the issue. And I know it's a source of frustration for members who are not the chairs and ranking members of the committees of jurisdiction, that we can help them, but we don't get them a proper cost estimate.
Yeah.
Honestly, we will do as much as we can, but it's going to be tough it's a problem. I'm challenged to see how we solve it other than just trying to work on it.
Yeah. You enumerated some expertise that you'd like to see, sort of buoyed within your organization. Could you just go over those again, where you would like to have additional expertise and what kind of resources you think it would take to build that capacity?
Okay. So healthcare is number one, where there's just an immense interest in healthcare legislation. So we're going to surprise billing, expansion of coverage in various ways, all the way from single payer to public option to incremental expansions under the current system to looking at the HRA rule that the administration has pushed, and then drug policy. So we're hiring right now new analysts who would work on all those dimensions, it's hard, of course, we compete with not just other government agencies, but with the private sector. And the private sector demand for economists is very stiff. And then the other part I'll mention is on the energy and environment side, we know we need to build our capacity in that, and we're going to be looking to add there as well.
Great, thank you so much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I forgot what it was. Hazard of being a mother.
Make it a question about Paw Patrol or something like that.
Oh my gosh, yes. So you kind of were able to get into it a little bit with regard to the health analysis. Can you elaborate on that in terms of what you see coming? Obviously, this is an issue that's not, I hope doesn't go away, because it's something we need to fix for the country, but this is going to continue, I think, to eat up more and more of your time and your staff's time. I got to believe, you know, Patrick McHenry and Maxine Waters aside, that this one is going to take up more emphasis, and I just wanted to see what your planning is with regard to that.
That's exactly right. And a challenge for us on health is we have excellent staff, and the rest of the world knows it. And so we lose them, and for good purposes. One of our top staffers on the insurance side just told me she's resigning. No, but she's going to go and be the head of research for the state of Maine's health insurance agency.
It's so hard, you can't say no.
She's from Maine, her
It's like, what are you
family's in
gonna
Maine. Exactly. So, and maybe in a few years we'll get her back.
Well, how can we help you? Because can we help you with that? Like, how do we help retain? Because these are obviously, for a lot of folks, it's a labor of love. Yeah, there's some, like, okay, well, there's some health, you know, there's different things that we can add to a package, but it's not going to be as competitive as what they're worth.
Yeah.
But we also really need them. So do you have ideas?
So we compete well, and we compete well especially on mission. And people understand that. People are interested in policy. We compete well on quality of life and the things around that. I mean, the things where we could be helped would be on the quality of life side. And I was going to say childcare is a natural one that we. So it's
What's that mean?
So it's just, and I'm not saying that just because of the situation in the room, but it's instances we
It's a bigger issue.
it's a big issue.
In this generation, I feel like more than in generations past, because what I'm hearing from staff and just in this position is people want more work-life balance. They don't want their career to mean they're foregoing the personal side of things. I completely understand that, and it is really, really difficult. So how do we?
And so I know we're in instances the
Please tell us how we get more work-life balance, because we're all very interested in this.
This is your key analysis.
This is going to turn into a therapy session, not a hearing. But it says I know we face some challenges. It happens to push the CBO interest. We are at or near the bottom of the priority list for childcare among the House complex. And so, more resources there would help everyone, but we would benefit. So that, I think, is probably number one. Number two is with our increase in staff, we're facing a little bit of a space challenge, which the physical space, which I was going to say, Mark and Joe and their team are dealing with it incredibly well. It means we've taken some of our shared spaces and turned them into offices. And so if there was some conference space or basically some other space in the Ford building, we would benefit, which I know is real estate is a tough ask, but that would be our next ask.
And it isn't, right? Because I feel like we always have all these federal buildings, somebody's always trying to round up buildings to sell or lease. So I'm just like, I gotta believe, no, we don't want to put you in like a warehouse in the other side of it.
Right.
But it seems like we should be able to come up with something.
Yeah. So that'd be the second thing that would go into the quality of life. So childcare, one, and then, again, a sort of modest amount of additional space.
Have you surveyed your workers around childcare?
We're in the process of doing that. And Stephanie Ruiz is on this side, is a is all over that. So we will have more information for you
You
soon.
know, I mean, we're talking to all the different agencies and offices about this with regard to childcare. So
Okay.
as soon as you find out, you know, make sure you let us
Provide
know.
the information.
Mr. Newhouse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Swagel?
Swagel, yes,
Swagel,
please,
is it? Well, welcome to the committee and to your staff as well. Thanks for being with us today. You guys do awesome stuff. It's amazing that you can respond as quickly as you do. But one of your requests has to do with response time. So can you tell me, is there an average, your ability to respond as far as time, and what do you see that, or what's your goal of improvement there with this request in your budget?
Yeah, it varies by the nature of the bill.
Sure.
What we focus on is making sure that, since we are not the obstacle, that we respond in the time that's needed for the, you know, whatever the legislative need. So some things we respond very quickly.
If things are moving quickly, you got to move quickly.
We have to. And we do best when we anticipate. So for example, surprise billing is is an important issue now. There's 3 committees on the House side and 1 on the Senate side. We started working on this before I arrived. And so we are very responsive there. We'll have another cost estimate out later today. The bigger challenge for us is having enough people with the expertise to be responsive, and then having in some sense the foresight to think about where the Congress is going.
So you're not saying, we've got it at 10 days now, we want to get it to 8 days or something. It's hard. You can't quantify it that way.
It's not, the quantification would be on what percentage of estimates we have for legislation before it goes to the floor of either chamber.
So you just answered maybe partly my next question. I was thinking as Ms. Clark was talking that what's the trigger for your research or your starting to work? Do you wait for a request, or are you anticipatory? Do you follow the process and you see, well, that thing's moving, we better get some groundwork done on that subject so that we can be ready, because it's a priority of the speaker, or you can just tell that, you know, there's a lot of momentum behind it. So tell me a little bit about that. So you're ready to move before we're ready to move.
You know, when we're at our best, we do that. We anticipate. And it happens that surprise billing was an example. There are 2 analysts on our health team who basically were looking at data on individual patients and realized that surprise billing was an issue with anesthesiologists and ERs, essentially. And so they were ahead, and so we've been ahead. It's made me look good just because 2 analysts were brilliant before I arrived. On drug policy, we know. I mean, we just, you know, even before the speaker had to start to work on her HR 3, on her drug package, we knew this was coming. We started building the capacity.
So that leads to another question then. Does your work, I'm not sure as you're doing that foundational stuff, does that help with the development of what the bill language would be? So how does that give and take or cross-pollinization, or whatever you want to call it, how does the work you do help us write better legislation? Besides just saying that's going to cost us much.
Right. That is good. And we try to be as helpful as we can.
But you don't volunteer stuff. We have to ask.
I was going to say, while respecting our role.
Yeah.
So this is what I've said is you will get our analysis and not our opinion. And in some sense, on let's say HR 3 was an example, the drug bill, there's just a lot of back and forth as the speaker and her staff looked for things that would, you know, be effective at reducing drug prices. And that's where we helped her staff. And again, we're not saying this is a good idea, it's a bad idea. That's not our role, but having, this is going back and forth. But it's the challenge for us is knowing where to draw the line and to say, look, we're not going to volunteer because it's not appropriate.
I suppose that's part of our role, Mr. Chairman, of being smart legislators, learning how best to utilize you as a resource. The issue of dynamic scoring, how do you make the determination when to use dynamic scoring and when not?
So there, we work closely with the budget committees, with the, both the House and the Senate and the chairs and rankers on both sides, in figuring out where the dynamic analysis would add important information. One challenge is that sometimes legislation is just moving too quickly for us to do it. But there are issues where we know it's important, and so we do it. So I'm trying to think. I'm sorry. We were I'm sorry. Yesterday we were talking about. I have to look at the stat. The dynamic analysis that we went through yesterday, the full bill. Anyway, I'll come back to you. I apologize. Because as we're working on trying to be in a position to do dynamic analysis more quickly in the future. So we were talking about the within CPO about the past analyses that we've done and what we've learned. So I'm hoping over the course of the rest of the 3 years remaining in my term that we will be in a position to do more of it, but it's still a work in progress.
Do you have an example you could give us?
So this is one of my predecessors did essentially a dynamic score on the immigration bill. So this would have been in 2013. And in a sense, it's got to be dynamic because the nature of the legislation is to increase the size of the labor force, right? More immigrants, we're going to legalize people, and so the labor force will grow. And so doing a static estimate in which the size of the economy is held fixed, in some sense, it doesn't make sense.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic, exactly. So that was essentially the first.
What if I were a sponsor of a bill or just a member of a committee? Can I say, hey, Dr. Swagel, we got to have a dynamic score on this? Would you respond to that?
I would have two responses. One is we would put our macro team, basically the people who would work on it, together with your staff and talk through it. And then two, I would say, basically, if the chair of the committee or the ranking member of the committee supports it,
Oh, I see.
then we would.
Not just a bill sponsor.
And that's the challenge that we have, is our capacity to do work outside of the chairs and ranking members.
You can only do so much.
We can only do so much. But the first part we would do, in some sense, in essentially an unlimited quantity of understanding where does the legislation affect the overall economy. I can give you maybe just, I think a second one.
Take your time.
One more example is on HR 3, on the drug bill, where that has a dynamic element in the sense of it will affect research and development going forward. And so it's something that we had in our cost estimate for the bill, but it's something I know there's a lot of interest in. And so we would, anyone interested, our team working on drug research would meet with the staff to explain why we think the bill would save money, and B, would have an effect on the future development.
Oh, so
You did do that?
We did. That is in
Analysis?
we have done that analysis.
So-
We're
so-
still doing more of it.
So you're essentially asking for a request to have a dynamic score?
It's not, I
Or
mentioned that one because it's not a dynamic score in the sense of the overall economy will change, but it's dynamic in the sense of, there's this forward-looking change in the industry that isn't fully captured in a sort of static 10-year view.
So I guess more simple than that.
Yeah.
You're not going to make a dynamic score determination without a request?
No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't.
Okay, yeah.
And it'd be a request, and we would consult with the budget committees in some sense to make sure that that's
The desire, yeah.
the best, yeah.
I don't know how this is framed, but can you capture in your analysis in healthcare, there's been this discussion about prevention. And I remember when we went through the whole deal with the Affordable Care Act, if I remember correctly, we could not get basically the benefits of preventative health care, which obviously is very frustrating because we all know that screenings and, diet, nutrition, and this and that, we're learning more and more, that's prevents disease. And so what do you tell a guy like me who's like into health and wellness and want to try to prove out that these preventative measures can save us a lot of money?
Yeah. So it's something we have worked on in the past and we're still working on. And the challenge is that in some ways, some prevention, as you said, saves money, but sometimes we screen a lot of people and it costs money to detect the small number. And of course, it's worth it. It still might end up costing money. And so in some sense, that's the challenge with prevention, is for us to have the research that would support, once you take the full portfolio of prevention activities, that on net they come out saving money. And that's something we're looking at closely to see if that, if that's supported and across what types of prevention activities.
Just to take that one level deeper.
Yeah.
So you spend money on all the screenings, but only a small number of the people you're screening are actually going to be sick or have cancer, or whatever the case may be. And so those two costs are balanced out in some way, and there may be a small savings, maybe.
Or it could end up on the other side of that, but in some sense, it's worth it, right?
Sure.
We catch people at stage 1 instead of stage 4.
Sure.
It's worth it. It just
So then,
costs
do you
money.
factor in the productivity of that person? Like, does that, like, they're out working then, because they're healthy and out being productive, as opposed to being sick and then getting care? Is that part of the analysis?
No, so that would be in a dynamic analysis, but not in the static, is the economic impacts. We'd have some impacts if we catch, I'll just continue with
Yeah,
stage
please.
1. We catch someone at stage 1, then they'd save money. Basically, the sort of treatment would be less expensive. And so we do capture some of that. Or the same thing, legislation that improves access to pharmaceuticals means we save money on the hospital side. So we capture those sort of dynamics, but not the bigger picture that you mentioned with Mr. Chairman on the labor supply. That's what we're missing. Can I mention one more thing
Sure.
in the same vein, which is what we're thinking about on the climate side is the same thing. If we had activities, if we spent money on things that would reduce the incidence of future costs, would that save money? And we don't know, but we know there's a lot of interest in that in that analysis. So we're at the beginning of it, but we're starting to think about that. And it affects military installations, flood insurance, a variety of things.
You're going to have your hands full with that one.
We realize, no, fortunately, much of the spending is discretionary. I mean, so it's fortunately in the sense of, right, we don't project future discretionary spending. We just, it just kind of straight line at inflation. But we know there's a lot of interest, so we're working on it.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to thank the doctor again for being here with us today, and appreciate all your work. And I do think you guys represent a resource that we do depend on. It's become an important part of our legislative process, but also one that we need to probably learn to appreciate and utilize more. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rupersberger.
Good. Well, first thing, I think you have a great organization. The CBO has been very, very bipartisan, and that's tough in this town. But I think you've done it well. You've talked about, and what a lot of your job is to pick what you're going to work on is picking your priorities. And in today's world, the priorities seem to change. A lot of things are happening now in the area of healthcare and immigration. Probably that you're doing more there now than you were before. So you've got to be flexible in that regard. My issue, and from a management point of view, is you have the resources and the staff. I understand you have 8 people assigned to the appropriations process. Is that enough? It seems to me there's so much volume that you have to deal with, and that everybody needs a score. If you don't have a score, you really can't move legislation. There's a lot of pressure on you and other agencies that you have to deal with too. So basically my question is, where are you from a management perspective? Do you have the resources you need? I also see that you're going to expand your senior analysts to do more, and then try to bring in the junior analyst, or whatever you call the junior analyst, and to maybe help you in that regard to service us and what we need in this process.
No, thank you.
You get it?
Yeah, I got it. And so this is, the answer is after this year, I think we'll be in a good position, and we're.
Why?
Is this because we've expanded the staff last year? We're in the process of doing it this year, in part on the healthcare side and the energy environment side. On the budget analysis function that supports the appropriations, as you said, we're adding in two ways. One is senior people who are more flexible. Right? Senior people will have broader portfolios, and so if, on the national defense.
How would you define a senior person, though? How many years or what?
It's years. Essentially, it's a mix of years and experience. And then on the junior side, it would be someone generally right out of college who would be at CBO for, say, 2 or 3 years, and would support the more senior people. And there, we're adding more of those staff. And again, for the idea is that they're just more flexible, right? We will have junior staff with good technical abilities who will be very versatile. So that's why I think after this year, when we finish our, the hiring program this year, we will have the resources we need, and in some sense, as long as we stick to the flexibility that we're planning on, I think we'll be in good position. And that's why in this request, we're just asking for the funding to basically stay where we will be at the end of this year.
What are things that we put pressure on you from our committees, our staff, that you would like us to change a little bit to help you do your job?
The challenges we have are the same as you have. At the end of the year with the appropriations, right, we had people working, not around the clock literally, but over the weekend. And it's just the nature of the process. And we're here to support you. So, we would do it, and the people working on that know, we all know that that's how we do it. The other challenge we have sometimes is when several committees or the leadership are interested in the same thing. And so drug prices are the issue right now, where we just have both the House and the Senate, multiple committees, leadership interested in the same issue, and there's a limited number of people. And, we figure it out.
How do you work with the administration? At all?
At the staff level, we work very well and routinely. And so our analysts will work with counterparts in executive agencies. We need to know, sort of this new transportation office, how much would it cost? On an analyst-to-analyst level, it's routine. And even at the OMB level, it's routine. At the political level, essentially, we don't, right? We're separate. I have people I know who are in the administration. I'm on leave from the University of Maryland in College Park.
Sir?
I am.
You
yes,
ever
sir.
had Lito's Pizza?
And
They don't cut their corners.
exactly. And one of my colleagues in the Smith School and the business school is in my old job as the chief economist at the Treasury. And so he and I know each other.
Relationships and trust.
Is the relationships, but at the political level, I don't know the head of OMB. I've never talked to him. I know some of his staff, but there's essentially no coordination at that level.
I guess you have some pretty smart people working for you.
We have a great.
Do you have any
great
Harvard
team.
people working?
Any?
Harvard people?
We do, yes.
No, you are, I know.
I
So was
am.
teasing.
It's Harvard on the health side especially is a great program. So a bunch of our healthcare team have Harvard background.
Just don't forget University of Maryland. All right.
So don't worry, sir.
Go back.
No, thank you.
So you talked a little bit about Dutch brought up interfacing with the executive branch. The question we have around MOUs, you have to get individual MOUs, is our understanding. Would it be easier if there was some kind of standardized MOU or some kind of, instead of doing the individual every time?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
On the data use, it's worked so far that when we need data, we've been able to obtain the data we need. The challenge that sometimes the legislative process will be happening so quickly that just the sort of going through the steps is, just that so the time doesn't work. We're still exploring whether there's some broader agreement we could come to. But we're not quite there yet.
Is it just part of the general struggle between the executive branch and the legislative branch?
It's almost, there's a little bit of that, but we don't have agencies that are actively trying to hinder or hide information from us. Sometimes it's more the bureaucratic inertia within an agency, and there's some that are better than others. that's, it's more that than a sort of trying to hide the ball.
Okay,
But we would come back to you for help.
okay.
You'll hear from us right away
Okay.
if we need specific help.
Well, did you have something?
No,
You good?
that's great, thank you.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you. Thank you. Thanks for coming in, and we'll stay in close contact. As you know, we talked about, this is a tough budget year for all of us, and we'll do the best we can.
Okay, wonderful.
All right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Committee's adjourned.